Last week I was in Maspeth, Queens, and I was filming the story for you from the movie Goodfellas, the filming location of the Billy Bat scene. The famous scene from the movie Goodfellas where Joe Pesci's character murders the Frank Vincent playing Billy Bats. That was where it was filmed. Today I'm in Forest Hills in Queens, and I'm visiting the place where the real life Billy Bats was killed. In 1970, Billy Bats was murdered at 11116 Queens Boulevard by Tommy DeSimone and Jimmy Burke. Now, as you can see, we're at 11116. So this was Henry Hill's Sweet Lounge, where the murder of Billy Bats took place. However, it's not quite as simple as that. It's easy to say there's 11116, that's where Billy Bats was killed. This building here actually looked vastly different back in 1970 to what it did now. So if we start off with this building right on the corner here, this is 11120. I was able to trace this one back all the way to 1950, and this building here has been a health club, a gym, a spa for the last 70 years. I didn't bother to go back any further than that, but that means that prior to 1950 there was never any 11118 that I could find. So at some point prior to 1950, 11118 and 11120, those buildings were torn down and this building was put in place. When the new building went up, obviously this is 11116, when the new building went up, it combined 11118 and 11120. So what they did was they gave it the street address of 11120, which is the higher of the two numbers. Now, if I take you down to this end, and I'll be able to fill you in on the story here, the two addresses that we have here are 11108 and 11110. And then it goes straight to 11116. So you've got to trust me on this one because I've lived in New York a long time. I know how this works. The one thing that there's a big difference though, even though this says 11116, back when Billy Bats was killed, this was 11112. Now 11112 stood here until 1980, and it actually has a role to play in the movie Goodfellas. Well, not this location, but part of the Goodfellas story, because at 11112 was where Marty Krugman's For Men Only store was. Now, Marty Krugman is represented in the film Goodfellas as the character Morrie, you know, the guy who wears the wig. When this store closed for men only, it was around 1975, and the murder of Billy Bats took place in 1970. And then after 1975, this became a real estate agent. Sorry, not a real estate, a travel agent. And then the very last year, 1979-1980, it became a jeweler's. But there was a separate building here during the time that Billy Bats was killed at 11116. So even though it says the address there of 11116, back in 1970, 11116 would have been this side of the building right here. Now this goes along with the story I was telling you about on 11120 down there. At some point, and I don't know when, but at some point probably prior to 1950, quite likely when this building was remade, 11116 was combined with 11114. Again, there's no record of 11114, So, you know, probably prior to 1950, more than likely, 111-14 and 111-16 were torn down, and a new building went up until where it says Naomi Hibachi there. Now this building in 1970, prior to 1970, sorry, was a furniture store. And then sometime in the late 60s, it became the Sweet Lounge, which was owned by Henry Hill. And this is where Billy Batts was killed in real life. So like I said, you have Marty Krugman's 111-16, 111-12. I'm getting all confused. I had such a great story today. And I think what it is, people keep walking back and past, and they're all looking at me, and it's kind of confused me a little. So in 1970, this would have been Marty Krugman's for Men Only, and the Sweet Lounge, owned by Henry Hill, would have been here at 111-16, which was a combination of 111-14 and 111-16. Now, I've got a couple of stories which I'm going to put in there that I found in the newspapers that happened in the Sweet Lounge, just to give you an idea of the type of establishment it may have been. Now, Henry Hill would have left this bar. He went to jail in 1972. And one of the stories I'm showing you is from 1969. And you can pause the video if you need to read the story. And the other story is from 1972. Now, whether Henry Hill still owned the suite at that point, he went to jail in 1972, but not until the end of the year. And the story is from March of that year. But obviously it's a mob-related story. Now what I'm going to do, just to finish off the video, after they murdered Billy Batts, so let me just clarify finally, even though 111-16 stood here, the bar, I believe, was here, and the lounge would have been there. And I think he was killed in the bar from what I was able to read. It's very hard to know exactly. Now, he was murdered by Tommy DeSimone and Jimmy Burke, and Henry Hill obviously had a part to do with that as well. But it wasn't until 9 years later that Tommy DeSimone was murdered in retaliation for the Billy Batts murder. And actually, I should clarify as well, in the scene Goodfellas, where Billy Batts insults Tommy, and then Tommy comes back and murders him, that's slightly inaccurate to the real life story. What happened was, the insult happened 2 weeks prior at Jimmy Burke's lounge, which is down by JFK Airport. And I guess Tommy DeSimone heard that Billy Batts was here on the night in question 2 weeks later and murdered him here. I know it's private property and somebody's going to shout, "Get out my yard." But I just wanted to show you the back. This is where they would have loaded up Billy Batts. Well, see, actually, Billy Batts didn't die right here in the bar. So it wouldn't be fair to say he was actually murdered right here, but the motion was set in motion in the bar. What happened was they put him in the trunk of Henry Hill's car, like right here. Then drove to Henry Hill's mum, no, Tommy DeSimone's mum, to pick up like a shovel and lime and all this stuff. And that's when they realised that Billy Batts wasn't actually dead yet. So the actual murder of Billy Batts took place at Tommy DeSimone's mum's house. Although the chances are, if they'd have left Billy Batts in the condition he was in, he probably would have died here anyway. So Queens Blvd in Forest Hills, Queens. The real life location where the gangster Billy Batts was murdered. And this building here was at one point the Sweet Lounge, owned by Henry Hill. Now, as I'm going to walk a little further, this is like some additional stuff I'm going to put in there. In the movie Goodfellas, the character of Tommy is murdered. He's being made a made man, and he's murdered with a bullet to the back of the head. Now, in Henry Hill's book, Wise Guy, that's what he said happened, that it was the son of Paul Vario and somebody else whose name I don't know. They were the ones who picked up Tommy DeSimone and then murdered him, actually with 3 shots. Well, after the success of Goodfellas, Henry Hill wrote another book. It was called Goodfellas and something, Goodfellas and Wise Guys maybe, I don't know. And why wouldn't he? Yeah, the money he made from Goodfellas, I would imagine. I probably would have made another story as well. Well, in the second book, both Billy Batts and there was another guy whose name, I'll stick it up on the screen because I forget what his name is. Both Billy Batts and this other guy were lifelong friends of John Gotti. And even though it took him 9 years, John Gotti was responsible for the murder of Tommy DeSimone. So when Henry Hill wrote his second book, he changed the story of Billy Batts being shot, Tommy DeSimone being shot in the head. He changed it to John Gotti tortured Tommy DeSimone to death. Personally, there were other stories that one of John Gotti's henchmen by the name of Tommy Agro, and what a great name that is, eh? Although it's spelled A-G-R-O. There's a different story that says that Tommy Agro killed Tommy DeSimone in front of John Gotti. Now, because obviously there wouldn't have been many witnesses back then, whether or not we'll get the truth as to what the story is, I don't know if the actual truth will ever come out. I tend to think because Henry Hill wrote the first book, and he wrote that book in great detail, obviously because they made a great film out of it. I tend to think that the original story that Tommy DeSimone was taken to be made a made man and subsequently shot in the back of the head, I would hazard a guess that that's probably the true story. Anyway, that's the story for today. I've got a lot of editing to do to trim this puppy down, but hopefully you found it interesting. I figured last week, as I went to Maspeth to film the movie location for the murder of Billy Batts, today I figured I'd come down to Forest Hills in Queens and film the real life murder of Billy Batts. Alright, bye for now guys. Remember, like the video if you think you enjoyed it. The likes always help out. And of course, if you want to hear more Mafia stories, go ahead and subscribe. There'll be more to come. Bye for now guys.